Yeah, we're rolling on through the afternoon here with Representative Phil Christofanelli from the great county of St. Charles. Phil, you're an active Twitterer. What's your handle?
You know, I'm at PHL Christo. So.
Christo. You don't want to do the whole thing. They kind of wear you out, right?
Yeah, I cut it off short. Nobody would spell that right.
That's right. They would not. Yeah, you're very active on Twitter. I think that's great. You grew up in this whole computerized, fully connected world.
That's right.
You really don't know anything differently.
No, it's natural for me, and it gives our caucus a voice on a platform that we didn't have before. And now that you got younger guys like me and Schroer and a handful of others, we actively engage on Twitter and social media to deliver our message not only to a new generation of voters, but to all the other traditional media listeners that also use those platforms. Yeah,
it's amazing what changes in just 4 years. I've been out only 4 years, but I've been out for 4 years, 4 full sessions. And when I left 4 years ago, it was a thing that everybody was kind of playing with. You know, Twitter was, and Facebook had been around a while. But do you all sit around and actually is there like a caucus strategy to okay, here's our social media plan? There's a social media plan now, I would guess, right?
There is to some degree. Yeah. We make sure that we all have things to contribute and different ways to access different media portions. The rural guys tend to focus on local papers, and us in the suburban areas focus on radio shows like yours, local TV, and social media as well. And, I was on the messaging team my first year in the legislature, and so we'd get together every week. We'd look at the bills we passed, and then we'd put together talking points so that people could go home and let folks know what we've been working on.
My understanding is direct mail is still huge, and you have to do it, and you need to do it, and you should do it. But I would imagine that social media is also working its way into campaigns as well.
You know, what's really incredible about social media is geo-targeting has gotten so specific that I can pretty much draw out my district on Facebook and do sponsored ads to folks that are
just
only
to
in
those
that
people.
Area. Yeah, which is really neat.
That's fascinating. Well, speaking of politics, we're in silly season now. Less than 4 weeks until the primary, and shoot, I guess we've got, let's see, July to August, less than 4 months to the general, believe it or not. You're running for re-election. One of the biggest races, not only in the state of Missouri, but in the country, is Claire McCaskill is back again, the incumbent, and she's going to run against somebody on the Republican side, whether it's Attorney General Josh Hawley, Austin Peterson, Cortland Sykes, Tony Minetti, Peter Pfeiffer. There's 11 people
it's nuts.
Who were filed, which I guess it shows the excitement and the deep bench we have, right?
There's a lot of people that think Claire needs to go. When I talk to my constituents back home, I try to hit doors every day, and that's one of the #1 issues I hear about is that they want a new representative in the United States Senate that actually reflects their values. And
isn't the biggest problem with Claire is, I think you and I who know her inside and out, she is a liberal Democrat, but she doesn't play one on TV all the time, does she?
Right.
She's chameleon Claire, and I think that you and I actually get along, I think, better with the people who are honest liberal Democrats, like my former colleague, Mike Colonna.
Mike
Colonna, another good Italian. Mike Colonna, people like that, because they don't try to hide it. They are what they are. They just try to convince you of their point.
That's right.
Claire her points are whatever they need to be, right?
Yeah, she comes home and she tries to pretend like she's an old-fashioned conservative Democrat, but she goes back to Washington and votes with Chuck Schumer almost 90-100% of the time. And so when we had things like tax cuts for working families that came up in Washington, D.C., Claire McCaskill voted no. When we had Supreme Court justices that that stood with our people on values and life, she voted no on them as well. And so she is representing herself back home in a way that she doesn't vote in D.C., which is the #1 reason you should be thrown out of Congress.
And Exhibit A is the fact that she had no problem voting against Neil Gorsuch when it was right in the middle of her term. And suddenly now she's having this epiphany that she needs to study Judge Kavanaugh's record, and her party has laid down the gauntlet against him.
That's right.
Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, the rest of the gang up there have all said no. Claire McCaskill, who votes with them, as you mentioned, 99% of the time.
That's right.
Why suddenly is she not sure, other than the fact it's an election year?
You know, that's convenient, isn't it? And the Democrats are also starting to live in fear of their base now. Their base has become so far extreme left that I would be shocked if Claire McCaskill actually voted for this Supreme Court justice, even though it's a perfect opportunity to show that she stands with Missouri values. They're so afraid of primaries from their left that they will take no action that would suggest that they're anywhere near moderate.
Have you thrown in with anybody on our side of the aisle, on the Republican side of the aisle, for the U.S. Senate race?
Well, these races cost a lot of money, and you have to raise millions and millions of dollars in order to become a United States Senator. It just is the way it is. There's 6 million voters. You got to get their message to them. And the only candidate that I've seen that stands with all of Missouri's values and has shown the fundraising potential to take on a United States Senator that's been there for many years has been Josh Hawley. And so it looks like he's far ahead in the polls, is going to come out of the primary on top. I really like some of the other guys in that primary. I'm not going to lie to you. I've known Austin Peterson for a while. He's a really cool guy. I don't think this is the end of his future in Missouri politics, but I think Josh Hawley's going to be our nominee. I support that, and I hope he gets to the United States Senate.
Yeah, I mean, Tony, you brought up that point. You like some of the other candidates too, but you kind of have to agree with Phil there, right?
Yeah, if you are in Josh Hawley's, if you're part of his campaign, yeah, I mean, you need to be focused on Claire right now, because what numbers we have and what information we have shows that his lead is monstrous in the primary. Now, I'd like to see more. I'd like to see some debating, or at least a conversation between these candidates. But I completely understand why the Attorney General it doesn't behoove him to do that. What do you think of the news that we got last week of the RNC sort of breaking tradition and approving the funding for his campaign before the primary, which is something they don't normally do?
Yeah, right, and that's tough.
While we do still have this active primary.
And I joined the Missouri State Committee when I was about 20 years old. I was put on the executive committee shortly thereafter, and so I was faced with similar decisions.
Name dropper.
Yeah, I was faced with similar decisions when I served on that committee, and it's really tough because you want to have a fair and open primary process, and I do believe we have that. But there is money that can come down from Washington, D.C. to support our candidates, but it's also often tied to a matching program. And if we're not willing to match those funds, they'd be left off the table. And you know full well that the Democratic Party is doing everything they can to lift up Claire McCaskill in the state of Missouri. They see what a battleground this is. And we simply can't afford as a state to not meet them on the ground in the battlefield that they have set. And so I understand why the Missouri Republican Party made the decision they made. It's never an easy one, and it's never going to make everybody happy. But that was the choice they faced, and I think they made the right decision.
Yeah, and Phil, we got a couple minutes left, but talking about gimmicks, that's what the Clean Missouri plan is, in my opinion, and that's a way to get more Claire McCaskill voters to the polls in November. Clean Missouri is the Clean Missouri of conservative plan, right? Funded by George Soros. That's all it's trying to clean out, right?
It's incredibly deceptive, Tim. It's probably the most deceptive thing that I've seen in politics to date. What it does is it starts off with a lot of things that people agree with, a lot of things that I've voted for, which is a lobbyist gift ban, a cooling off period, increased transparency laws for state government, all things that a lot of folks agree about. But its truly sinister purpose is to take our redistricting plan, which currently happens in a bipartisan way and ultimately usually goes to the appellate courts.
That the state legislature has nothing to do with.
Right. The state legislature can't even touch. It's usually done by the state appellate judges, which you could hardly say are a conservative bastion in this state. and it takes it out of their hands and puts it in a singular partisan position, the state auditor, which happens to be just conveniently the one position that Democrats hold in Missouri state government.
Yeah, right then and there, you would think, okay, if they were going to do anything, they should make it under the Secretary of State and be maybe try to be a little clever about it.
Right.
But the fact they chose a random office like state auditor for an electoral purpose,
it makes no sense.
It makes no sense, and that should cause everybody great chagrin.
Right, and what it does is it says it essentially mandates gerrymandering. It's going to take away our compact regional-based districts that we have right now, and it's going to try to draw all these districts so that even though St. Charles is 65% Republican, it's going to try to draw a district in St. Charles that works out to be 50-50. And so you're going to have to draw in a bunch of people from St. Louis. It makes no sense.
We will have Illinois gerrymandering, won't we?
That's exactly what they want to achieve.
Exactly
Chicago machine politics.
Well, Phil, it was great. We covered a ton of topics with you. Good luck to you in the election season. And at Phil Christo, right?
PHL Christo.
PHL Christo. On Twitter, you can follow Phil. He does great stuff. And we'll be back with more of the Annie Frey